Mr. Aziz, thank you for talking to China Daily. I know you come to China like multiple times, and you came to China every time with a different identity. And you used to be the former Prime Minister of Pakistan,
Yes.
and also you're an economist as well.
Yes.
And now you came to China this time with maybe a different new identity. So how do you feel about that?
I think my visits to China, even before I joined the government, I was working for a major bank.
Yes.
And I was head of Asia Pacific for the bank. So China being an important market and an important country, I used to come regularly even then. My first trip was in 1980s, and I've been coming for 30 years plus. And I've been fascinated. Every time I come, I'm struck by the commitment of the people and the government to move ahead. Every country has challenges. Every country has opportunities. It's a question of showing to the world and your people, more importantly, that progress is being made. And I can say that over the last 3 decades, I have seen consistently every time I come and I travel around the country if I get an opportunity, what I've seen is the pace of change. And change is a constant in the world. Change has to be viewed as not a threat but an opportunity. And to transform change into value added requires a lot of hard work, leadership, management, policies. And I think China, by and large, has shown that they are moving in that direction. It's not just me saying, the whole world now looks at China. China is a very important market. China is a major supplier of goods and services. China has a large area. China politically and geopolitically is very important. It's a member of the P5 in the UN Security Council. So it has a role in diplomacy, a role in geopolitics, a role in security, regional and global. Certainly in the Asian region, China is an important player, as it should be. And so that's one part. The other part is what you see in the country. And as an objective observer, I would say that the pace of development, the rate of change, the improvement in the infrastructure, the improvement in the quality of life of the people has and is very visible, has made tremendous strides. Even the most critics of China would say that these things have changed and they are physically there, they work, and I think the people naturally are benefiting from it. Any country with a growing population, large population, with a huge tract of land and covering so many different parts of the world, has to, for the leadership, it is like being on a treadmill. You have to constantly change, adjust, improve. And I think if you go to the current situation, the Third Plenum came out with what I consider, as a friend of China, as an observer of China, a substantial and comprehensive document on what the roadmap will be or the policy framework will be going forward. Obviously, as I said today in my remarks, that implementation and all that will clearly be very important. But the fact there was some, to an outside observer, there were some very profound statements in that communique which came out, and the details which came out had more in it, which is number one, that the market economy, the market forces ought to drive a lot of the change. Clearly, deregulation and going to a market economy does not mean abdication by the government. In fact, the responsibility of a government in a deregulated environment increases much more than in a regulated environment. Because in a regulated environment, you get permission for everything. In a deregulated environment, you have to have different ways to watch the situation. But you cannot abdicate. Government can never abdicate. In any market in the world, if there is a major event which affects the public at large or the country at large, the government has to be there to explain what happened, why it happened, and what were the checks and balances which were there. So many people mix deregulation with total hands-off policy. No, markets have to be, as you've seen, history has shown us, recent events have shown up, that when markets go into a disarray, the sovereign has to intervene. and the regulators have to intervene. But in day-to-day stuff and giving space to people, no need to have 15 stamps on the same document. You got to open it up. And the more ease it is to do business, the more growth you will get. Jobs will be created, quality of life will improve, and living standards will improve. This is true everywhere. Back to China. So I thought this going to market economy and market forces to have their role is important. At the same time, the SOEs will also have a role. I assume at some point some may be privatized, which is healthy. And in many countries have done it and found that it has advantages. There are certain strategic industries which may remain in the public sector. Others, you could corporatize them. There are many ways of looking at this issue. So if you corporatize them and list them on the stock exchanges, public participation comes in. Corporatization also means more disclosure in line with the securities and exchange rules of every country. And so transparency is a great discipline in everything we do. And in terms of activities which are being talked about, this will be a big plus. The other thing I think which came out of this whole agenda is the need for structural reforms. Structural reforms are no longer a reform which is in the business world or the economic world. Structural reforms are a very holistic concept, and they cover everything one does or a country does and every aspect of activity. So it is the pace of reform, though, has to be carefully thought through. The other thing is that every country, through growth, development, and mobilizing public opinion, creates absorptive capacity for a reform. You can't just say tomorrow we will do this, this, this. You have to see, is there a capacity to absorb? Is the infrastructure there to cope with it? Is the regulatory mechanism there to cope with it? Does the private sector have the capacity, financial and managerial, to take care of that particular sector of the economy without government intervention, participation, or whatever? So every case is different. In certain strategic industries, they have to be within the government control. They can be privatized, they can be even listed, but government can still and should have control. And very often their products are, the only customer is the government.
Yes.
So those things, they're exceptions. But to me, these 2 or 3 major profound changes have been received very positively. As you said, I travel the world, I talk to a lot of people, and they are very encouraged with what they have heard. Clear, precise, and now details have come out which actually show that much more thought went into it as we expected, but some people maybe reacted initially by saying, where are the details? They all came out and it's all there. So I'm encouraged. I think the unleashing the potential of China
Yes.
is the task of any leadership and any ruling government. And this third plenum will allow this to happen. As I said earlier, implementation and details and how you do it, clearly China has enough capacity to do that, but these are important factors.
Okay.
And those have to be looked at, and I'm sure your government and your leadership has ample knowledge and experience and quality that they know what has to be done.
Yes,
So I'm very excited. I think I'm excited as a friend of China coming from Pakistan. If China does well, we genuinely feel very proud that China is a close friend of Pakistan in many ways, and it's a global power.
Yes.
It's a global economy. And if they do well, it's a strength for Asia, strength for the region. And perhaps in sometimes the growth and development of China may make some people uncomfortable in the short run. In the long run, it leads to a healthier world, a peaceful world.
That's true, because a lot of people, a lot of countries in the world right now intend to consider China as a major threat.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about that?
I think, I always think of Newton's third law of motion.
Okay.
Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. This is if a country grows like China, it's an immense country with tremendous output and growth and potential, all three. It makes some people a bit uncomfortable. But that's life. I think that should never sort of cause us to be defensive or to say we will not grow. And your leadership has shown that they have said what they believe. So I think there may be discomfort here and there, but by and large, people respect what China has achieved. People respect what has been done here. And may I also say that the tendency to look at a country through the lens of another country may not necessarily be the best way possible. Because who knows China better than the Chinese leadership and the Chinese people? They know it. So if somebody says, we do it this way and you're doing it a different way, as such, we know better or we are better, that's not true. That is very narrow thinking. People are entitled to think what they want. But the point is, I think the world at large looks at China, we're talking about China at the moment, with a lot of awe and respect and empathy. Certainly from Pakistan, this is very clear. So this respect is there. Now, challenges will always be there. You cannot. I don't think one should even worry about the reaction of any stakeholders or of countries of discomfort. In fact, generally, by and large, it should be positive, because a strong, healthy, vibrant China is good for the world. And that's how you get peace and stability, so that even countries who are in the region benefit from that. If you have a big, rich, successful neighbor, it helps. Yes. If you have a neighborhood which has one problem after the other, it becomes a problem for the whole region.
I see.
So if I were living in Asia, I'd be happy if China is growing. And China is much bigger than Asia, I mean, in terms of its influence. Also going to, for example, Chinese companies are active in Africa. And I read sometimes that people had some issues.
Yes.
The point is, if you look at the world at large, multinationals have been going across borders for decades, if not centuries. And so why, if Chinese company goes and gets a license for mining in a country in Africa, what's so unique about it? Everybody else has been doing it for decades. So let's...
Speaking of, we're going to Africa, because after the third plenary session, as you have mentioned, China is ongoing, like, recently we brought up this new idea called the New Silk Road theory, which is actually encouraging our Chinese investors to do business with countries in West Asia and in Middle East. And you're an economist and you're a former politician. Yes. What's your advice for Chinese investors to do business in that area, especially following the New Silk Road?
Yeah, I think the New Silk Road obviously is one way of branding an overseas investment policy or strategy. To me, I look at the world much more holistically. So whether it's the Silk Road, whether it's Africa, whether it's Latin America, I was recently in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and I was so proud and happy to see. They were telling me, I said, what is this construction going on? They said, this is the light rail system being developed by China for Addis Ababa. Fantastic. Why not? The Ethiopians love it. The Chinese have been very gracious in helping them. It's a win-win for both. So my point is that the Silk Road countries in Central Asia and some South Asian countries, including ours, Pakistan is part of it, that's a good historical link which can be developed and further exploited. Trade is always win-win. Trade can never be one-sided. So if you have more trade and more investment and jobs are created, that is the right way to go. But it has to make basic economic sense. So my view is that if a country welcomes a foreign investor, the receiving country is fortunate to get people who come with expertise, with funding, and with techniques which are normally not available in that country. Now, if some say we don't want it, the sovereign has the right to say, sorry, we don't want. But by and large, foreign investment is greatly needed in the developing world. And China being active in the way we are, and I've been in government for 8 years. I've dealt with China and its government agencies for a long time. They are much easier to deal with than many other countries. And whatever is agreed to is delivered. Financing is available. So it's a complete package. And the speed of execution is much faster. So I think China does offer some of these advantages. And it behooves China to spread its activities beyond the immediate neighborhood, because that's part of developing markets and sharing your expertise with countries which don't have that expertise. So whether it's Africa, whether it's the New Silk Route, whether it's the Caribbean and Latin America, in the developing world particularly. Having said that, the Chinese private sector is now visible in developed countries too. And you have seen activity in many projects in Europe and in the industrial sector, also in the United States. Of course, sometimes there may be some challenges in getting in, but in time, I think this will all settle itself.
See, okay, if I want to put our conversation into another perspective,
Sure.
What role do you think that China and Pakistan will play in the future economic development?
On the economic development side,
Yeah.
our relationship is multifaceted, of course. Okay. There's a security aspect, there's a geopolitical aspect, there's a diplomatic aspect, there's an economic aspect and a social aspect. People to people, exchange of cultural delegations, education, people coming here to study, all those things. So any area you look at, there's a lot more detail as you start peeling the onion, so to say. Now, I think on the economic side, our relationship is already moved substantially. When I was in government, I can share with you that in my first visit, I noticed that our representation in China is much lower than it should be. We had one embassy in Beijing, no other consulate, nothing. So the first thing I did when I reached back is, in fact, while here, I told the ambassador, you better start looking. A consulate in Shanghai, a consulate in Guangzhou, and a consulate in Chengdu, to begin with, these three. And we got the necessary formalities completed, and they became realities within months of my decision to open them. Secondly, we set up a joint investment company with China. It's called the China-Pakistan Investment Company, based in Pakistan, 50-50. And this was, again, a means to institutionalize the relationship rather than personalize it. Institutions don't die, so they continue and they keep growing. Third was a free trade agreement, historic, for Pakistan and I guess for China also, to have tariff preferences for products exchanged between the two countries, especially China's trade surplus with Pakistan is, the exports to Pakistan are higher than the imports from Pakistan. And we are trying to increase our exports to your country too. But the tariff reduction creates an incentive to increase trade. So that's on the economic side. In addition, many development projects are funded by China, soft loans and some commercial loans, to buy equipment, to build dams, to build roads, to build the Gwadar port was built by China, financed partly by China, partly by Pakistan. Dams are being built by Chinese contractors and international bidding. And then it comes with financing too. Yes. So I can go on and on. The fact is that the China-Pakistan economic relationship is a win-win for both. It creates markets for you. It gives us much needed resources and technology and supplies to set up manufacturing in our country. Every major contract, I might add, for major infrastructure projects in Pakistan is going to Chinese companies. Not that we are saying it will not go to anybody else. It's international bidding. Sometimes funded by the World Bank, it's supervised by them, or the Asian Development Bank. So on merit, these contracts are awarded, and the experience has been largely satisfactory.
I see. Thank you for your insights. Thank you. Before we go, our readers might be curious about your life after you served so many years with your government, also private years with investment banks. Yes. So can you briefly tell us what your major activities now are?
Now?
Yeah.
My major, 30 years in banking, 8 years in government. And now last 5 years I'm a free citizen. So I do what I want to do, and I don't have to do what I don't need to do. And in this case, what I do is, first of all, I'm on several boards of companies and advisory boards around the world, whether it's in Europe, North America, Asia, some in China too. That's one activity. Secondly, I'm on the speaking circuit. So I go give speeches, and gives me an opportunity to interact with different people. Third, I do some advisory work. I don't have a large staff or anything. So a lot of it is me. And so I'm sort of a global citizen at the moment, trying to, by the grace of God, a lot of interest from around the world. I don't have time to keep up with it. And I do what I enjoy. I don't have to, I have the privilege or liberty that if I don't enjoy it, I don't have to do it. Okay. So it's a very fulfilling sort of period of your life where you do what you, and I'm also in the process of writing my book, which should be out in a year. We've just started the process, which will cover.
Will it be published in China?
Of
or
course.
on Amazon, maybe?
No, we'll publish it in Chinese.
In China?
First, it'll be on the international circuit. Then
Okay.
we'll go to China is the first country we would come to once it's done.
We'll be expecting your work, your book.
No, it'll cover a lot of these things, and it won't be just. It'll cover geopolitics. It'll cover the economy. It'll cover security issues, because these are the three, and social sector, and my experiences. And we'll try to make. What I'm trying to do is make the book as forward-looking as possible, rather than just talk about what we did and didn't do, but to extrapolate out to how we see the world. China will be featured in the book, of course.
I see. Thank you, Mr. Aziz. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
My
with
pleasure.
China Daily. Thank
Pleasure
you.
meeting you. Thank you.